Perfect. So welcome everyone. This is the second edition of the Eastern Canada CNCF Meetup virtual edition and our very first tech talk where we have two panelists who will share their experience with GitOps and Istio version 6. So I am Alec Shelley. I am from DataWire. I work as a software engineer, and I am one of the co-organizers for the Montreal CNCF meetup. Today with me, I have Jason and Julia, who will be taking care of moderation and Q&A. Of course, we have multiple meetups across Canada: Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Quebec City. And given the COVID situation, it is a great opportunity for all of us to connect and share our knowledge and love for CNCF technologies. I'd like to take a minute just to highlight all of the other organizers from the local communities, including Archie, our CNCF ambassador, Anthony, Souvro, Raymond, Sébastien, Carole, Dima, Christopher, and Chris from Ottawa. We also have a plethora of sponsors without whom these events would not be possible: Red Hat, Rancher, IBM, Elastic, StackRox, Tigera, Microsoft, D2IQ, JFrog, and Container Solutions. And especially this month, I would like to highlight CloudUps for hosting us onto their webinar platform. So a few announcements. Please follow us on Cloud Native CA on Twitter. This is our newly created Twitter account. We are in the process of coming up with a brand new website to host all of the various cities. But in the meantime, while this gets underway, we will communicate all announcements on Twitter. We also communicate all announcements on Slack, and we have a vibrant community of professionals who share their thoughts, their ideas in each of the different cities, and as well a few broader topic solutions. So there's a link here at the top for a self-signed URL for getting an invite to this Slack community. We plan on doing more of these events. Again, two formula, either the virtual tech talk like today, where we will host international grade speakers with Q&As about different CNCF technologies, and the cloud native stories, which are catered for a more local audience. So communities from Canada, companies who use technologies from the Kubernetes ecosystem want to share their stories. It's a great opportunity to recruit and as well as talk about your adoption of technologies. There are community days coming up. Kubernetes Community Days were a new initiative that launched, I believe, last fall. Sadly, as we got organized for some of these events, COVID happened, and so most of them are postponed at the moment. Although the Kubernetes Community Days in Quebec City is still on the roadmap, and they have targeted a date of October 15 for a in-person event. So we wish them luck, and otherwise we'll find solutions to turn it into a virtual event. Some other news about the Kubernetes community as a whole. You might have heard that Dan Cohn from CNCF stepped out as an executive director, and Priyanka Sharma was just named recently as the new GM of CNCF. And she, one of the first order of business was to actually release a statement about bringing the community together, especially in these rough times with the Black Lives movements and racial equality. So first order of business, I definitely invite you to read her blog post. It's very upbringing. Today on the agenda, we have 2 talks. Hopefully we can stick to about an hour, but I do expect we will overflow to maybe 1:15 p.m. If we do have a lot of questions. Our first talk will be about Kubernetes GitOps for mere mortal. We were supposed to have Dan, but sadly, for some personal reason, he couldn't be here today. It was very last minute, but we have Rachel Tabib from Codefresh. He's actually the CEO of Codefresh, so not a small character. So we're very pleased to have him on board and replace Dan for today. Our second talk will be about the Istio 1.6 update with Shriram and Sébastien. Sébastien is from our local community organizer in Quebec City, and they both work for Tetrate. Codefresh will be doing a raffle later on, so please keep your eyes on the chat. You have a little chat window available in your Zoom webinar. And if you want to ask questions during the talks, there's also a Q&A button that will allow you to post questions that will allow Jason to view the questions, ask them, and make sure everybody's getting an answer. There will also be a survey that will be sent out at the end of the event. So please, again, keep your eyes on the chat for filling out the survey. And with this, I will leave it over to Raziel. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Alex. And let me share my screen.
Yes. All right.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, that works perfectly. Thanks, Rachel.
So good morning, everyone. Good noon. My name is Raziel Tabib, and I'm the CEO and founder of Codefresh. Very pleased to be here. In fact, I live in Palo Alto, but it's interesting. My whole wife's family is actually living in Hampstead, which is like just by Montreal. So I visit there pretty frequently, not in COVID times. Outside of work, I'm really passionate about technologies, trying out new technologies and coding. Few words about Codefresh before I'll talk about what we're gonna see in this deck. So basically Codefresh is modern CI/CD tools built from the ground up for Kubernetes, for cloud native application. And our vision is basically to make it very simple and easy to deploy applications so we can focus on coding. Okay, with that saying, what I'll do today is I'll basically give a quick overview of GitOps practices, like the very, very basic. And then in the demo, actually, I'm going to show 2 aspects of GitOps, one very basic GitOps, and then I will basically combine GitOps working with Argo CD and also working with Argo Rollout, and will demonstrate a simple Canary deployment. And I will explain a little bit what is Canary as well. You can find the repos that I will demo with on my GitHub account. So again, there are 2 Git repos, one that will demonstrate a simple GitOps and one that I will actually demonstrate Rollout, which is a basic Canary. So GitOps, Basically, it's very simple. It's very simple, and although it's very simple, it's also very powerful. What it means that I have managed the whole manifest of my application in Git repository. So each time when I want to make a change to my application, not a code change, but a change like I want to run a different Docker image in my application, or I want to add a config map and so on, I will make this change to the Git repo. And then the tool that I will use to sync the Git repo with my application will make sure that my changes will be reflected in the application or will be synced back to the application. So if we look at a simple diagram, and again, this is a very simplified one, and it can be much more complex. But in a simplified version, you will have a Git repo for your application source code. That's where you write your code, whether it's in Go, in Node.js, in whatever language that you choose to implement your microservices or cloud native application. And then you will have another repo, which will have the Kubernetes manifest of your application. And that will be always the desired state of your application. And obviously, you're going to have your application also here running on Kubernetes. And ideally, it will be in the same status of your synced to the status that is reflected in your Kubernetes manifest. Now, again, this is a simplified version in which you will have one Git repo that is synced to your production environment. You might have multiple Git repos here, one for your production environment, one for your staging environment, if you have multiple environment, or you might have one Git repo in which the master is reflected the application in production, and other branches will reflect the application in staging, and so on and so forth. Now, in order to sync your application with the desired state that is stored in your Git repo, there are various ways to do it. Today, I will use basically the Argo project, Argo CD project. What is Argo CD? Argo CD is part of a family of open source project under the name Argo. Argo CD is basically the CD tool that will help sync in your GitOps repo with your application, and I will show this tool in the demo. Basically, Argo CD, as well as the other Argo project, are all part of the CNCF organization. I think this was announced not so long ago. You can find the list of the Argo projects that have been accepted to the CNCF. You can find more information about the Argo CD in GitHub. It basically talks about how to configure it. It has a CLI. It's a pretty powerful tool, but it's not the only tool. There is also Flux that can do similar things, and there are other solutions too. In the demo today, I will use Argo CD, which is again an open source for that sync. Let's continue. So we'll use Argo to sync with the Kubernetes GitOps repo, and then we'll also be using Argo Rollout. Argo Rollout is basically a CRD, also an open source project of Argo that it has a custom resource that is called Rollout, which behaves like the entity deployments in Kubernetes, but you can actually also define your deployment strategy, such as blue, green, or canary. To ones who are not familiar with this term, so canary basically says that when you have a new version of your application, rather than replacing your old version with a new version, you will provision your new version side by side with the old version, and then you'll start gradually move production traffic to your new version. As you shift for your production traffic to your new version, you check if everything goes well. If everything goes well, you continue shifting more traffic. If not, you basically can roll back to your old version. This is again one flavor, the various flavors of how to implement canary deployment. Blue-green is basically when you have the new application side by side with the old application and testing it, and then you can just kill the old application. You can basically see and learn more about the Argo rollout. Again on the GitHub repo. The Here in this example, you can see that at the latest part of the YAML, you can define canary, you can define the stages, move in, pause it, shift traffic like 10 or 20 and so on. And I will show you in our example, I made it very simple. I basically shifted 50% of the traffic to the new version. And then after a while, I just roll out the whole changes to the new version. So we talked about Argo CD, we talked about Argo Rollout, which are the two open source projects that I will use in the demo today. And in the demo today, I will also use a CI/CD platform as part of this process. Again, I use Codefresh in this demo, but this can also be implemented with Jenkins or any other CI/CD tools that you have in place. The flow that we will demonstrate is I'll simulate a commit to the application source code, which like in usually will trigger a CI workflow. The CI workflow, mine is very simple here. It's basically build a new Docker image, but it obviously can run unit tests, can run security tests, functional performance, and so on. And in the end, create a Docker image, push it to the registry. Once you feel like you want to deploy to your production, that's where you update your Kubernetes manifest with a new image. This in return, as this is a Git repo, can trigger another pipeline that can call Argo and ask Argo to sync. Argo can be also configured to sync automatically. When you do it through a more robust pipeline, you can do some steps before the deployment, some steps post the deployment, and so on. So this is the flow that we will see in the demo. Okay, it's demo time. So let me show you first the repos and everything that I will use in this demo. So if I'm looking at my repositories, there are 3 repositories that we will use here. This is the Express microservice. This is a simple Express microservice, nothing special about it. And then there are 2 repos, which are GitOps repos. One, which is very basic, is include the service, the Kubernetes service, and the deployment. Basically, this is describing the which image is going to be run for my service, and so on. The other repo that I have here is the Rollout repo, which look exactly the same. The only difference is that when I look into the deployment entity here, it's of type Rollout. Basically, again, that's the Argo Rollout project. And in the end of this deployment, not only that I have the image here, I'm also specifying the strategy, which basically says canary, and then I'm asking it to set weight of 50%. So that's 50% of the traffic will shift to the new version, and I pause it, and then I'll show you after how I can unpause it, and in fact, causing the full rollout to replace the old version. So this is with respects to the application and the repos. And then let's look at the application themselves. Again, when I go and I look at my Kubernetes clusters, there are 2 services running. This is the GitOps app, and we can see here, it's basically simple Express, nothing in here. And we have also the Rollout app, which in this case is also, it's a different URL, but in Express. Okay, let's see that work in action. Let's go to the repo itself. Let's make a commit. Let's change it from Express to Espresso. And let's see how things work. So we're making a commit. We change that. This will trigger a CI pipeline. So if we go in here and we go into the build, again, I'm showing it with Codefresh, but this can also trigger a job in any other CI tool. But when I go inside, let's look at the step that I put here. I will be cloning both the repository of my application, and I will build a Docker image. But I also going to do 2 other things in the same time. I will clone also the GitOps repo, and I will clone the Canary repo, and I will make the changes to the YAML file to specify that I'm using a new image that is being built in the same time. Once the image will be built, will basically commit these changes to both of these repos, and we will see the actions of updating the application one time using a simple GitOps and one time with a canary. So let's wait for this commit to take place. Okay, so they both take place. Now, if we go back, we can see that there are two CD pipelines now that being triggered. I've actually paused this one. So this one will start and we'll pause because we're going to look first at the very basic, and then we're going to go and look into the more advanced one, which is the canary. So if I'm going to go and look into the Argo CD one. So this one will just make the changes to the just call the thing the algo, which, let me look at the algo here. Just a second, I'll show you algo in the meantime. So algo actually also, you can actually see that it's calling it. So as we speak, it's actually updating it to the new service. I don't know why the UI here was not refreshed. So here actually it's completed. So we see that we did we could have done like a pre-sync command. We called the algo and we went to the posting. In fact, when we look at it at algo, it's actually reflected and have the new app here. So if I'm gonna go now to the application, and we go to the GitOps app and click on this, we'll basically see here Espresso. Now, if we go back to the build, we'll see that here in this case, I paused it. Let's look and let's just resume it. And we'll see that here I started a rollout, and we'll see that Argo will basically start creating a new pod for the new version, but to only one pod. And basically there will be two versions running in the same time. So 50% of the traffic will come, and let's look at it in Argo. So if we go in back here to the rollout app, we will see now revision 23 basically holds the two pods that serve the service. Argo will now spin up a new replica set and a new pod with a new version. And only after this version is up, it will basically take off the one pod of the old version, and then we're going to have the traffic being shared between revision 24 and revision 23. So it will take a few more seconds to come up, and now when it's up, we basically see that there is one pod here, which basically says that the traffic is shared between these two. Obviously, it's been. Let me look at it if that will work. So come back here, and if I'll go to the rollout app, it's Espresso. Let's do that. Let's try it again. It's supposed to have 50% of the traffic going. Maybe I will be lucky. No luck. But 50% of the traffic, let's look at it here, will be shifted to the new one. We can see, in fact, if we're going into this pod, this is running this image with finishing with 25D. And if we're going to go to that one, this is one that's finishing with B2-8C. They're running two different images, and the traffic is being shared between these two pods. Now, if we're going to go back to the application, and because what I did here in the repo, I basically started the rollout, and I paused it. So here we could have basically run some additional tests or run any task that we want to do. And once this is ready, we can basically, I stopped it manually, but it can be done automatically and promoting it. So now when this will resume, Argo will basically promote the changes to run on 100% of the traffic. So this is, again, the basic of Canary, and we're using also GitOps in a sense that we are storing the application desired states in a Git repo. So now it's updating it. If we come back here, we'll see shortly that we will spin another pod for the new version as it happens now. And once it will be up, it will kill the pod from the old version. So again, this is at any point of time, we can see if our application is synced or not synced with the Git repo. We can see the status of the application, and now it's actually progressing. Once it will finish the rollout, it will basically indicate that our application is healthy. Why is it so simple and so on? Again, the status of the application is, so now it's healthy, it's synced, it will take off the other pod. If we go back to our repo, we can see that at any point of time, we can see what's the status of the application, which basically, this is the status of the application, what we have here in the image that is running. It's very simple also to roll back, because basically when you go and you look at the commits, if I want to bring my application to the previous stats, this is the commit that we made. We just made, we updated the image from this one to the 25D that we saw. If you want to bring the application back to the previous stage, as basically check out the previous commit and just check it in, and the application will go back. And this is like, again, provide a very easy way to roll back changes. So again, in a nutshell, what we've seen both Argo CD, that is a tool for syncing application with the desired set in a Git, with the GitOps. We've also used Argo Rollout, which is a new CRD in Kubernetes that allows us to define the deployment strategy. And in this demo, we've also used Codefresh with the plugins of Argo that can start a rolling out, promote a rollout, sync Argo, and so on, and help you manage the whole automation in one place. Before time to question, just again reiterating why it's so convenient and simple. So again, it's simple, but it's not compromised on the powerful. It's also very powerful. It's repeatable. We always use the very same way to apply changes to the application. Again, it can be much more complex than what I show here. We can have a Git repo for each one of our environment. It's predictable. You can know what's the desired set of your application by just looking at the Git repo. It's auditable. We've seen the commits, so all the previous commits can show where the application, what was the state in each time back in the history, and it's accessible. Everyone can make basically a PR that can be reviewed before promoting to production. Any questions?
Yeah, so if there's any questions, please submit them in the Q&A. As they come in, I'll bring them up. Right now, there's no questions, so.
One other thing is that, as was mentioned earlier, there will be a raffle. There is a raffle, and the winner is going to be announced in a chat and also in an email.
Okay, questions coming in. First question from Maxime. How do you manage secrets with GitOps, as you have the source of truth in Git?
So secrets are managed outside of the Git, as you don't store your secret in Git. You can use it in a vault, but it's a good question. I wonder, Kostas, are you on the line and familiar with that more?
Yeah, so secret management is a big question. I don't think there is a correct answer. There are some people who think that secrets should belong in the Git repository, and there are some tools that help you with this. I think one of the most popular ones is Mozilla SOPs. So you have the secrets encrypted in Git, so your application can fetch them from there. But in some bigger companies, they have completely different workflows, mainly for legislation or something like this. So they have, I know, HashiCorp Vault or a completely external tool for secrets, and they have their own life cycle. So it depends on what you want to do. You can use the same flow or a completely different one.
But that's a good question. If the secrets are not there, also that's I would say maybe the one thing that is not fully auditable within the Git repo, which is a good point. The config map and everything else is there, which actually it's pretty powerful, because even if you make a change to the application that is not a code change, just config map or anything else, you can still track and see that in your Git repo. But secret, it's still a challenge.
Okay, great. Next question from Charles. How does Argo CD react when a new service is not healthy?
So you actually see the status of not healthy there on the Argo CD, and this is like basically an operation that you will have to do manually from what I have seen so far. So Argo CD can be configured to do the sync automatically or not, and if it's not, you basically see that it's not healthy. There are a few statuses there. The one that I've experimented is healthy. There's not, and there is the suspended one, which basically said that you are during a phase of rollout, but it's not completed yet. There's still a few steps to take on. But I don't think it takes action on its own to fix this situation. It will show the errors, and it has a very great visualization that will help you find out what the error and what the issues are, but you will have to resolve them yourself.
Does the Argo CD have any rollback built in as part of that?
Not that I have seen, maybe. Again, I just try this out, that I try new technologies. Didn't dive into all the bits and bytes.
Next question from Igor. What is a benefit of Argo Rollout?
So Argo Rollout, again, if you're thinking about, and perhaps in the next session you talk about Istio, when you think about when you want to deploy more advanced deployment strategy, like Canary or Blueprint and so on, the deployment, the native deployment entity of Kubernetes does not have this. You will have to implement it using a lot of scripts and manipulating the load balancer and the traffic. Rollout implemented a new CRD, which has all of what the deployment entity of Kubernetes has, but has the ability to define your deployment strategy there, and it will take care of it. So you can basically replace your deployment entity with rollout entity, and it will allow you to just specify it, and then it will take care of it. Again, from my experience, it was very intuitive, very, very simple on other solutions that I've seen to set up the weights. You can also extend the Argo rollout with analysis template, which basically gonna start some analysis in between rolling out the changes, and based on the results of this analysis, it will dictate whether to continue with the rollout or to go back and roll back. And it's very flexible and customizable, so it takes a lot of the scripting away and lets you use something that is already ready.
Okay, and last question, I'll just read these out. So how is Argo routing traffic between deployments? How does this differ visually when or if using service meshes to control traffic to A/B versions?
Say that again, sorry. Can you repeat the question?
So yeah, how is Argo routing traffic between deployments? And if you're using a service mesh, how does that affect things?
It's a good question, too good that I'm not very familiar to answer this question. I know that you can see the traffic, how it goes, but I haven't deep dived into that aspect. So, unless Kostis, are you familiar with that?
I just want to mention it's a more, let's say, general answer. You can do, A, B, or different routing without a service mesh, but you have less flexibility on how you choose your traffic and what kind of traffic you send to one version. So if you're happy with, let's say, the basic capabilities of Kubernetes and some simple tools, you can do this. If you want more advanced flexibility, you need to use a service mesh. So it depends again on the organization. If you're happy with plain routing where you just choose a percentage and that's it, you don't need a service mesh. If you need some kind of smart routing with path differentiator, you need the service mesh.
But maybe I will add one more comment. I think I hope I didn't confuse by combining the demo of two different projects, Algo CD and Rollout. These are two separate projects. Algo CD is basically just taking whatever you put in your Git repo will be reflected in your application. So basically doing kubectl apply and run all of these files and making sure that they're synced. And if they're not synced, it will indicate for you that they're not synced. The rollout is actually the technology that deals with all the traffic and how to control the traffic in between the different pods and so on. And I found it very intuitive to start with. Again, I haven't deep dive into it, but it's very easy to learn more and see what are the set of capabilities that it offers.
All right, let's give a virtual hand to Raziel for a great talk about GitOps. And just want to jump on to the next topic. And while we're on the topic of service mesh, I just want to introduce our folks from Tetrate to talk about Istio.
Can I get started?
Yep. Please take it away.
Yeah, sure. So hi folks, my name is Shriram. I am one of the principal engineers here at Tetrate. I am also one of the founders of this Istio service mesh project, and I sit on the technical oversight committee and also manage the entire networking component inside Istio. Today I'm going to give you a quick update on what has happened in Istio since in the last 6 to 8 plus months, along with some major improvements that we have done to the project, as well as some futuristic looking things that will be actually happening in the next 6 to 8 months. To start off, the first thing that we actually did within Istio was to actually dramatically simplify the entire deployment within Istio. So if anybody had tried Istio since, let's say, 1.1 to 1.4, the architecture that you would have seen would be something like this, which is you had the proxy, sidecars to every service, and then you had pilot, mixer, which is where you do policies and telemetry, and as well as and then Citadel that you would use to distribute the TLS certificates. So based on community feedback and the fact that Mixer was becoming a single point of failure, even if it's just telemetry, the first thing we did is all Mixer extensions, all the telemetry extensions for Mixer, emitting metrics and Prometheus format, Stackdriver, Datadog, or whatever format it is. All of these extensions have been moved directly into Envoy itself. And so we rewritten these extensions based on the WASM work that was done in Istio by us. So all of these execute directly in Envoy, which means you no longer have a single point of failure, nor do you have any form of additional overhead to send telemetry or do any policy checks. And this is all based on WebAssembly. You can write your own C++ modules that you can dynamically load into all the sidecars in Istio, which then gives you powerful programming flexibilities in terms of having executing custom logic when processing network traffic. And we are working on a nicer API to actually provide WebAssembly modules watch the space for more updates in the future. Okay, so the architecture that we have today is essentially one single binary called Istio, which has pilot, and Citadel built merged into it, and the sidecar injector as well as the validation webhook. So if you were to deploy Istio since 1.5, all you'll see is just one binary running as 5 to 7 pods or how many ever pods that you decide to use. And and you can connect, you can disable the CA inside Istio and connect to an external CA if you want to, and it's certainly within the RAM. The second thing that we did was to simplify the entire Bootstrap. In the past, what used to happen is that in the past, what used to happen is every time a pod was created, Istio, sidecar injector would try to mount a pair of certificates for mutual TLS. And only after that, the sidecar envoy will start and everything else will start. And sometimes when, during high load, if the search secrets are not immediately available, even the pod creation would fail. So we decided to rework the entire logic such that, we are using the built-in Kubernetes CA to authorize with the control plane, and then we implemented the Envoy SDS in order to completely convert this entire process into a dynamically controlled secret distribution mechanism. So there's no more secrets to mount or anything of that sort. Literally, anytime a pod comes up, it talks to Istio, sends a certificate signing request. Istio signs it after validating the pod's JOT token. The Kubernetes JOT token. And then that's it. It's business as usual in terms of MTLS traffic across all pods. So this mechanism will not only just simplifies the entire approach, but it now easily enables you to run the same sidecars on VMs as well, because the whole thing is based on dynamically generating CSRs and getting it signed. Then in terms of user experience, we've done a few things as well, which is mutual TLS between any two sidecars is completely automatic today. You no longer need destination rules or any config for that matter in order to configure mutual TLS. Anytime there is two sidecars, they will only talk over mutual TLS. So essentially what it means is that the more sidecars you deploy in your mesh, the more encrypted your entire cross-application traffic is. And port naming is also not essential. In generally speaking, though in a production is advised to have the port naming, but we would automatically detect if the protocol is HTTP or TCP, and then appropriately send the decode it, get the metrics along with all the routing rules and so on and so forth. We've actually added a really cool tool in IstioCTL called Diagnose and Recommend. It's called IstioCTL Analyze. Essentially what it does is that given the entire set of Istio configs that you actually pushed into a Kubernetes cluster, this thing will actually read all of them, analyze the entire set of configs to detect any form of inconsistencies. For example, if you had created a virtual service, but you forgot to create a destination rule that declares all the subsets for that service, this thing will warn you. In the CRD status, as well as an analyze command output, it will tell you that, hey, I think you forgot to create a destination rule, so traffic to this thing may be giving 503s or whatnot. Or if you forgot to set some global auth policy while you're trying to do something else, it would also try to warn you that, hey, maybe you forgot these kind of policies, or incorrect service entry creations and so on and so forth. It's pretty cool to the extent that we can keep encoding more and more common sense things, as well as common issues that people face, which would think of it as a your local FAQ / Istio troubleshooter kind of a system. We also have this running automatically in Istio, so that it will automatically detect any runtime issues and mark them in this status field of every CRD, which means you can write your own tooling to read that status field and give feedback to the end user that some configuration has an issue. We've also done a bunch of work on the API front. So in the past, we had cluster RBAC, service role, and so on and so forth at the application level. We've got rid of all of them. Today, there's only one single API for RBAC called authorization policy, where you can do jot validation as well as service account-based validations. We've completely moved to the operator API. No more Helm charts in Istio. So everything is driven through the operator API for the most part. Yes, there's an Istio CTL apply manifest, but that's still using the operator code built in. And yeah. And in terms of install and upgrade, the operator tool continues to be improved. We are actually also providing, working on operators tools for multi-cluster installation. And the really cool part is that you can actually now test two control planes. For example, if you have 100 namespaces in a cluster and you're using one single Istio to manage it, you don't want to just upgrade Istio like willy-nilly and stuff may go wrong. So the idea here is that you can deploy the newer version of Istio in one single control plane with some, command line flags to say, just watch this namespace or whatnot, right? And, or, you can, and then we can, you can launch a bunch of sidecars wherein you can specify, hey, connect to this version of Istio that's running somewhere else. And, the whole thing will connect and you can actually test if the new control plane is working properly or not. And then, and then you can decide to slowly roll it out. We are going to perfect this feature in the coming months such that the entire Istio update can actually be fully automated. It would, use the entire thing, try it with the new control plane, make sure things are stable, and then and if it's not, it will automatically roll back. Think of it as a built-in, deployment management for Istio. And yeah, finally, the other thing that we've done is given a first-class representation for all virtual machines, whether it's on GCP, AWS, on-prem, and so on and so forth, such that treat them as an equivalent of a pod in terms of this new API called workload entry, which is essentially the Kubernetes pod equivalent, but for VMs and so on. The big motivation behind this is so that you can now use service entry with label selectors, just like a Kubernetes service, which then means that you can actually have a service entry that selects both pods and VMs. So imagine trying to migrate some service from VM into Kubernetes. You can just have both be fronted by one single DNS name. You can do the same thing even with the Kubernetes service as well. It can select both pods and VMs. So it makes for a very powerful way to seamlessly migrate your applications from VM to Kubernetes, or even simply just routing traffic to a whole bunch of VM-based applications. And yeah, and we'll be improving the entire VM onboarding in the coming months, such that I'll talk to you about these things in the end. So yeah, other improvements is very minor improvements, things like being able to configure sampling rates of Zipkin or Jaeger traces. And we have a much better integration with Prometheus now. You no longer just need to install the Prometheus that we provide as part of Istio distribution. You can actually install Prometheus directly from upstream Helm charts. And Istio comes pre-configured with the Prometheus IO annotations, which then means that any upstream Prometheus deployment that you get, right, Helm chart based or operator based, they would just work out of the box with a some service mesh that's being installed. Finally, in terms of Outlook, as I was describing, so we are working on more VM integrations so that we can actually automatically onboard VMs on EC2, GCP, Azure, with and provide them with mutual tailor certificates based on their cloud service accounts, and also simplify the installation of sidecars on VMs. And we actually now have support for DNS over TLS, and it's improving. And we are also trying to add multi-cluster DNS resolution within the control plane. And finally, we are working on some better WASM support so that you can actually have your own plugin registries, just like Docker registries. You can write your own plugins and upload them and download them from that place dynamically. So yeah, so that's about it in terms of the updates. And that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the update, Shriram. It's very detailed. Love it. So just let's see. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box. Just looking at the questions. Question here. just to summarize, so it looks like with the recent changes to Istio, it sounds like the change to just set up Istio in a declarative fashion has now been changed to a more imperative methodology. This may have impacted our installs CD. So the question is, do you have a recommendation for installing that doesn't use Istio CTL?
Sure. Yes, I would say you should try using the operator, which is not going to use Istio CTL, but actually, like, it's much more. You will have the declarative approach that you actually wanted, rather than using the operator. So, and just have to deploy the operator one time, and the only thing you would have to upgrade is the operator itself.
And how does this work does it still work in a sort of GitOps fashion?
Yes, I mean, the Istio operator is just a service that you deploy one time in a Kubernetes cluster. Then, you can have a CRD that simply says install Istio, from this binary, I mean, Docker image for Istio-D, and from this Docker image for Sidecar. And that's it. I mean, it's just like, it's just a standard CRD that you can actually use with any GitOps tools.
Okay, question from Betsy. I saw multiple articles comparing service meshes between each other, and Istio was adding more network overhead or latency than others. Were there any performance improvements with Istio recently?
Yes, so we've definitely been doing more and more performance improvements generally. And at the same time, it also caution against any of these articles that compare, because it's a lot of things depend totally on your network, or on your workload environment, what kind of traffic you have, and so on. If the average response time for a query to one of your backend services is 10 seconds, then even a 20 millisecond or 100 millisecond latency that Istio adds is going to make no difference. And so it's like it's a never-ending horse race, and depending on how you configure your system, right? And depending on also what kind of protocol you use, if you use HTTP2 or versus normal HTTP1 and so on, you can squeeze a lot of performance and by optimizing it. So it's just a matter of optimization in terms of how to do it correctly.
All right. Okay, I just want to take the time to wrap up. I don't want this to go over. Just want to finish on time. So again, I just want to say thank you to Shriram from Tetrate for a great presentation for what's new with Istio. So a virtual round of applause for him. I'm just going to take my screen sharing back. So just a couple closing notes before I let you all go. So yeah, please fill out the survey. We really appreciate any feedback that you have for this presentation. It helps give feedback to our speakers, but also how we run these events and really make these events work for you. So Alex has posted the link at the chat, and here's a QR code that you can use to submit to the same thing as well. One other final closing note here is our sponsors at JFrog. They are running a virtual conference meetup. It's called Swamp Up in the next week or so, and we encourage you to go and attend. There is a promo code there, which will give you for some free tickets, but it's also the conference itself is only $20, and registration fee will be donated to COVID-19 charities. There are a number of great speakers, including Brenda Burns, Jessica Dean. I believe our own Archie will be making an appearance as well, and I recommend you to go check them out. With that being said, we are recording these talks. We will be posting the link once the recording becomes available. We'll be posting to YouTube, as I believe like last time. And that's it. I think just once again, giving a great round of applause to our speakers for making this tech talk available today. And we look forward to seeing you at a future virtual Eastern Canada meetup. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.